Don't hide back there. Great. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Senator Susan Collins of Maine, and I'm very pleased to be here with a strong bipartisan coalition of my colleagues who have worked hard to draft a compromise that would help keep guns out of the hands of terrorists. Each of them has provided critical support for this effort. Our goal is simple and straightforward. We want to make America safer. Some of our groups supported Senator Feinstein's amendment. Others supported Senator Cornyn's approach. But all of us are united in our desire to getting something significant done on this vital issue. Surely the terrorist attacks in San Bernardino and in Orlando that took so many lives are a call for compromise, a plea for bipartisan action. There are three major features of our amendment. First, individuals listed on the no-fly list or the selectee list, which provides extensive extra screening before an individual be allowed to board a plane, would be prohibited from buying a firearm. The total on this list, these lists, is approximately 109,000 people, the vast majority of whom are foreign nationals. Essentially, we believe that if you are too dangerous to fly on an airplane, you're too dangerous to buy a gun. Second, Americans and green card holders could appeal a denial to the courts and recover attorney's fees if they prevail. The burden of proof would be on the government. Third, we include a look-back provision that ensures a prompt alert to the FBI if anyone who has been listed on the broader terrorism screening database within the past 5 years purchases a firearm. This is similar to a provision that was included in Senator Feinstein's amendment. I want to especially thank Senators Heitkamp, Ayotte, Heinrich, Flake, Kaine, Graham, King, and our colleague from Florida, Senator Nelson, for co-sponsoring this initiative and for their many contributions to this very important effort. I would now like to call upon Senator Heitkamp for her comments. She has made many valuable contributions to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins, and thank you so much for your incredible leadership. Many times in issues that are as contentious as this one, stepping out isn't always easy, but it's absolutely essential if we're going to get something done, to actually come to the table, sit down and say, what can work? You know, we've gone through a series of votes. We've taken all these votes pretty much before, and the outcome hasn't changed. And if we want to get something done, it has to be bipartisan, it has to be simple, and it has to accomplish the purpose. And so if the purpose is no fly, no buy, we've accomplished the purpose. Because if you're on the no-fly list and you attempt to purchase a weapon, you will not be able to secure that weapon. You will have the rights to appeal, as you should with the Second Amendment, but you will not be able to purchase that weapon. If you've been on that no-fly list or that selectee list in the last 5 years and have come off like the Orlando terrorist, then you have an opportunity, in fact, to have it pinged and have notice. And the one provision I especially believe is critical is that the FBI can't do this alone. We need the involvement of local law enforcement, and the ability to notify local law enforcement is absolutely critical. And so no fly, no buy is taken care of in this bill. It's a great bipartisan proposal. I applaud all of my colleagues who have taken what can only be a pretty terrifying in some ways first step into trying to achieve bipartisan consensus on an issue that today is one of the most contentious issues before the United States Senate. These are people who want to get things done, and we look forward to working with all the rest of our colleagues in explaining this proposal and moving this concept forward, hopefully getting a vote, and Susan can respond to that, hopefully getting a vote, but actually getting something done, passing a law, which to me is a critical first step in having a broader discussion. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize Senator Ayotte, a former Attorney General who helped draft the appeals process.
First of all, I want to thank Senator Collins, Heitkamp, all of my colleagues who are here today that have worked very hard on this proposal. I also want to, in particular, thank Senator Nelson as well. As we had the votes yesterday on the Senate floor, we knew what the result was going to be. And this is an opportunity for us to, instead of having political votes that we know are going to fail, to stop the politics with this issue. And what you see behind you is a bipartisan group of senators. This is a common sense bipartisan proposal to ensure that terrorists cannot purchase firearms. No fly, no buy, and this is one where it ensures that Americans have the due process protections that they need to challenge the finding if they believe it is wrong. And if it is wrong, then they can recover their costs and attorney's fees. There's no doubt that we all share the goal with the horrific terrorist attacks in Orlando, that we have to do all that we can to defeat ISIS and radical Islamist terrorists. But this attack also did highlight the urgent need to address the terrorist loophole. And we are doing that today by ensuring that we introduce this bipartisan legislation that we hope will get a vote on the Senate floor and get passed. And getting beyond politics and working together to make sure that those who are on the no-fly list or the selectee list, that terrorists cannot have access to guns. And that is why I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues, and I call on our leadership to have a vote on this. And I look forward to having this proposal on the Senate floor, and I hope that it'll garner the support that it deserves so that we can get a result for the American people here and quit focusing just on the politics, but let's focus on getting an important result which ensures that terrorists cannot have access to guns while also protecting the due process rights of American citizens, which is important to all of us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Heinrich worked so hard on this bill. He and I must have exchanged at least 30 phone calls and text messages over the weekend, and I want to thank him for his very hard work.
I want to thank Susan Collins for having the guts to stick her neck out and reach out to Heidi Heitkamp and myself and her colleagues and all these fine senators and say it's time to start putting progress in front of politics. This is a straightforward proposal. I think we're all heartsick at the kind of terrible Groundhog Day feeling that we've had as we've seen shooting after shooting in this country. And it's very comfortable for us to sit in our respective corners and vote for something that, that we know isn't going to change things. It is a lot more difficult to engage with members of the opposite party and try to find what can actually move forward. All the senators that you see up here today want to find that path forward. That's what this amendment's about. It should not be complicated. If you're on the no-fly list, if you're on the selectee list, you really shouldn't be buying a gun. I say that as a gun owner myself. These people should not be able to buy a gun. End of story. They will have due process rights, absolutely. And the 5-year look back is absolutely critical because it you know, if you look at the Omar Mateen case, it had the potential to intervene when that most matters. This is a common sense proposal, and I just want to thank all of the senators standing up here for being willing to stick their necks out.
Thank you, Mark. Senator Flake was a stalwart supporter from the very beginning and also made important contributions to the appeals process.
Thank you, Susan, and thank all of you behind me here. This has been a good process. What you see here is an effort not to have a vote that will simply allow each party to use a cudgel to beat the other party with, but rather to have something that will actually pass. That's what this effort is, with the premise that if it's too dangerous to allow you to board a flight, then it ought to be too dangerous to allow you to purchase a weapon. That's what this is about, and I appeal to our leadership, the leadership on both sides, to allow a vote because we believe that this vote can pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Senator Kaine has made it clear that he wants to see progress on this issue, and I am delighted that he has joined us. Thank you.
Well, thank you to Susan and to all my colleagues. I'm pleased to be here with this important proposal that would take the existing law that prohibits 9 categories of individuals from owning weapons and add an important 10th category. The bill's been explained. I support it for 3 reasons. First reason is this: I'm sick of the shootings. I'm sick of the vigils. I'm sick of the homicide victim support groups. I'm sick of the claims that we'll do something about it. I'm sick of the partisan rhetoric. And I'm really sick of getting to the end of all of it and not doing something about it and seeing that happen again and again and again and again. We suffered badly in Virginia at the Virginia Tech shooting. We thought something would happen, and there's just been one tragedy after the next, and this body has been impotent, weak, silent, and a bystander to this carnage of gun violence that's going on in the United States. That's the first reason I support it. Second reason I support it is it's bipartisan. There's going to be no meaningful gun safety reforms done in this body if it's not bipartisan. We've got essentially a 60-vote voting threshold in this Senate. I wish it'd be otherwise, but that's what we've evolved to. There's a Republican House. If we're waiting around for the Democratic version, and I supported both Democratic bills yesterday, I like them, but if we're waiting around for the Democratic version to sail through here, or the Republican version to sail through here, all those victims who are waiting for us to do something will wait for days, months, years, forever, and we won't get anything done. We've got to make progress, and to make progress, we've got to do it in a bipartisan fashion. Third reason I support it is this. I believe if this passes, and we add 109,000 names to that prohibited list, it will enable me to continue to make my case for universal background record checks. Once we've added those 109,000 names to the list, and we tell people that, frankly, these folks can still buy weapons. These terrorists can still buy weapons if we don't have a good background record check system. My leverage for making that argument goes up. The shooter at Virginia Tech was barred federally from having a weapon, and he got it, and he killed 32 people because of gaps and weaknesses in the background record check system. We got to fix it, and if this passes, we'll have more leverage to be able to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Senator Graham helped write the look-back provision that is so important to this bill and that originated, I believe, with Senator Nelson. So, Senator Graham, thank you for your support.
Thank you. The reason I'm supporting it makes sense to me. You know, I listened to what Susan had to say. I listened to Bill. It sort of makes sense to me. I own an AR-15. If you're on this list, it doesn't bother me one bit that you can't buy one right away. There are 2,700 Americans on this list combined, and we're at war. And Joni Ernst mentioned today that there was a senator from Iowa on this list, and that his name somehow got on this list and he couldn't fly, and he was able to work it out. So that surprised me a bit, because to get on this list is pretty challenging to get on this list. But let's just assume for a moment that mistakes will be made. Here's what I'm willing to say to people of South Carolina. We're at war, and I don't know how to protect our nation without really changing the way we do business in a fashion that makes sense. The likelihood of someone being on this list and buying a gun to use it in a terrorist act, to me, is far greater than the likelihood of an innocent person being on this list. But here's the tiebreaker. We can fix the problem with the innocent person. Once the gun's bought, you don't fix that. So if you don't like this idea, please tell me where we went wrong. because the person who is on the list for the wrong reason, they have a way to fix the problem. The people on the list for the right reason, this is just one more tool in the toolbox to make sure they can't hurt us. And as to gun violence and terrorism, if gun control could prevent an attack by radical Islamic terrorists against a nation, France would be in great shape. I don't want to oversell. If you think we've solved the terrorism problem by passing this, if we do, we have not. But we have taken a step in the right direction in an area that makes sense to me. To my friends at the NRA, I understand your concern about denying somebody the right to buy a gun. That's a constitutional right. But every right, whether it's speech or buying a weapon or any other constitutional right, has boundaries on it. We're talking about 27, 26, 2,800 people. We're talking about a process where we can right a wrong if an innocent person finds themselves on the wrong side of government action. But I am far more concerned that the people on this list would buy a gun and kill as many people as they could with it if they bought it. So that's where I come out. I hope we can pass this. Let's put it this way. If we can't pass this, it truly is a broken system up here.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Senator King always brings Maine common sense and intelligence to every issue. Senator King.
I'll tell you one story from the Intelligence Committee that's not classified. Susan and I are both on the committee, and one day she was making some comments, and Senator Heinrich leaned over to me and said, "Is there something in the water in Maine that gives people common sense?" I thought that was a great compliment to both of us and to Maine. I view this as a national security issue, straight up. I'm on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committee and have seen the threat of international terrorism develop and morph into a new form of threat to our country. It's terrorism 2.0. September 11th was a plot hatched abroad and executed by people that came from foreign countries. What we have been hearing in our committees and what we've been hearing as we talk to the national security people and intelligence people is that the next phase of attacks is exactly what happened in San Bernardino and in Orlando. People already here, radicalized online, often acting as lone wolves and attacking Americans. That's the national security threat that we now face. Our Constitution gives us a balance of a number of values, but the fundamental values of why we have a Constitution or indeed a government are embodied in the preamble. And in the midst of the preamble to the United States Constitution are the following words: "We the people," that's what it says on my tie, "we the people have established a government in order to ensure domestic tranquility and provide for the common defense." There are other purposes as well, but that's the fundamental purpose of any government. And if we are not providing for the common defense and ensuring domestic tranquility, we are failing in our most solemn responsibility in this body. And we are failing with full knowledge of a terrorist threat. Right now, our brave men and women in the Middle East are bombing and doing everything they can to destroy ISIS's arms and arms cache. If there's a truckload of arms coming across the desert, we take them out. What sense does it make that ISIS can mobilize people in this country and they can walk into a store and buy a gun? Why are we making huge efforts and spending millions of dollars to take arms away from our enemies abroad and allowing them to buy them here in the country? Now, I believe that this amendment is absolutely appropriate. And I think everybody has said, they keep using the word bipartisan. I prefer nonpartisan, guys. But this is not, I don't think this is a minor step. This is a major step. This is a major gap in our protection and in providing for the common defense and ensuring the domestic tranquility. Now, there is a gap waiting, however, that we also need to address in a future iteration, and that is the fact that even after we pass this, if a terrorist goes to a gun show, There's no check at all. So we've got to close that loophole. That's another discussion for another day. But this is an important step, I believe, in absolutely the right direction. I voted for Senator Feinstein's amendment yesterday. It didn't get enough votes. What we have to do is find a middle way that we can lead this country to protect ourselves from what is, I think, a serious threat, a continuing threat, and it may even, I hope not, but it may be an increasing threat. And I commend Senator Collins for sticking her neck out and for taking heat, for trying to find a rational middle ground. And I think it's a solid amendment, and it's very simple. If you're on the no-fly list or the selectee list, you don't get a gun. To me, that's good old Maine common sense.
Thank you, Angus. Of all of us here today, there is no one who has experienced the pain felt by the families who have lost loved ones to terrorism more than our colleague from Florida, Senator Bill Nelson. So I'm really pleased that he could be with us today. Thank you.
I owe it to the people of Orlando to try to get something done. I owe it not only to those families of 49, but I owe it to those families of people still in the hospital, some of which may not make it. I owe it to those law enforcement officers that stormed that nightclub, and one of which I met has a scar 1 inch long on his forehead that his Kevlar helmet stopped that bullet. And I owe it to those surgeons in the trauma center. And of course, you've seen the bloody shoes of one of those surgeons. I owe it to people who have come up to me as I have been on South Orange Avenue in the heat of summer and have just been engulfed in tears as they hugged and said, please do something. Now, this is a step forward. And interestingly, those who think that there is such a big difference, if you look at the numbers on U.S. persons, which is American citizens and people that are legally in the U.S., that is the definition of a U.S. person. In the Feinstein bill, that would only include 5,000 people. In Susan's bill, it includes 2,700 people. That's the difference between 5,000 and 2,700. Basically, American persons, 1,000 on the no-fly list. That's all. And 1,700 on the selectee list. Now, if a person is 2,700 people, aside from the foreigners, 2,700 that are being watched for terrorist actions, do I want them to be able to go and get one of those killing machines? It defies common sense that you would not want to prevent that. And the final thing is that in and of itself would not have caught Mateen. And so he was on the terrorist watch list. He had been interviewed 3 times. And he was on the terrorist watch list for 10 months in 2013 and 2014. So when he goes, if this bill will pass, to purchase a weapon, It won't stop his purchase, but it will ping the FBI so that the FBI will have that information and can act on it and go question him again. That's not too much to ask for those of us all that stand up for the right to bear arms under the Second Amendment.
Thank you very much for those eloquent words. I think you can see that we all feel very strongly about proceeding with this compromise. We are each committed to getting something done. We do not want to fail the American people. I'd be glad to open this up to questions for all of my colleagues.
Senator Collins, very quick two-parter, very fast. Can you just explain the relationship between the selectee list and the no-fly list? Are they the same when it comes to who this applies to? And the second part of my question, I wish Senator Kaine hadn't left, but Senator Heitkamp, are you convinced that Democrats are willing to give up a potent election issue that cuts very well for Democrats for a relatively small gain here in terms of policy?
So to answer the substantive question first, both the no-fly and the selectee list would be covered by our amendment. In both cases, there is credible information that the FBI has used to move people from the terrorist screening database to the no-fly and the selectee list.
I would tell you this. I think my colleagues in the Democratic caucus are ready to get something done. They're ready to move the ball forward. And I think the lens at which everyone is looking at this is, does this actually accomplish the goal of no fly, no buy? We don't know yet what that count's going to be ultimately. We'll have to do the legwork that happens anytime you have something like this. But I would strongly resist a characterization of analyzing this proposal as being political.
Senator Collins?
Yes.
Senator Collins, if there are 2,700 people that are so dangerous they can't fly or buy a gun, why doesn't the government just round them up now?
Because the government lacks probable cause to do so. Now, some of them are being monitored, but there is not a sufficient level of evidence to bring charges. That's the problem. So, yes.
Have you had any discussions
sorry,
with your
did you-
leadership about this moving forward and getting a vote and when that would occur? And we've also seen, as Senator Graham can tell you, these types of bipartisan compromises, they go to the House and they die. Is your expectation that this could move in the House?
Well, first I'm going to have Senator Graham respond more to the last question, but then I'll answer your question, Senator Graham.
We're not fighting a crime, we're fighting a war. So we're surveilling people that we think are tied to terrorists. And sometimes the level of evidence is not sufficient to grab them and prosecute a crime, but it is sufficient to make sure that our intelligence community watches them. So to those who want to turn this into war, I will be your worst opponent. I believe the FBI deserves the authority from the Congress, and we as a nation need to protect ourselves from people who are acting suspicious enough to get on this list. So I'm not trying to suggest that if you're on this list, you're going to get charged with a crime. I'm trying to suggest that if you're on this list, you go through a major cut. Now, the guy in Iowa, I don't know how he got on the list. Does that bother me? Yes. But we built in due process to make sure that if somebody's wrongfully on this list, they can get off. But I'm confident, and I've looked at this pretty close.
But you're talking about retroactive due process.
We're talking about stopping somebody from buying a gun who our intelligence community believes shouldn't fly. So what I'm balancing here is, if I stop you from buying, I own an AR-15. I don't mind telling somebody on this list, we're not going to let you buy a gun, but we're going to give you a chance to prove you shouldn't be on that. The government has to prove you should be on that list. That's inconvenient. I got it. The government has to prove that you should be on that list, and you can get your attorney fees if the government fails in that burden to show there's credible evidence that you're tied to terrorism. That is a inconvenience. What if you buy the damn gun? Then what do you do? So I'm balancing the likelihood of somebody on the list buying the gun and using it against somebody on the list who is innocently on it. So there's a way for you to get off the list, but there's not a way to stop you from buying the gun unless you do what we're doing. So that's my answer to that.
If it's a wartime rule, are you treating them as semi-combatants? Are you classifying them as combatants so they wouldn't have the same rights as a citizen?
We're going to go back to Luke's question since you had one. Luke, yes. Many of us had a meeting with the Senate Majority Leader, Senator McConnell, today. He did say that he would give us a vote on this important amendment. I am very pleased to hear that, and I thank the Majority Leader for agreeing to that. I think it'll be this week. It could go over to next week, depending on what else is stacked up, but we will get a vote. I am confident. I would hope so. You know, the American people overwhelmingly support this kind of proposal. So my hope is that our House colleagues will also want to get something done, particularly since this is a more targeted approach than others that have been advanced. I'm sorry. I have not had discussions with the National Rifle Association. It's possible others have. I have not. But what I would say again is that if you ask the average American what they think about this, they are going to say that a person who is too dangerous to board an airplane is too dangerous to buy a gun. And I think there is overwhelming support for this approach, especially since we built in robust due process provisions.
Last question. So Democrats are saying that Republicans need to bring at least 20 people to support you. I'm wondering if you think you have 20 Republicans to support this proposal. And just a clarification question on the policy. Dianne Feinstein's proposal didn't stick to the letter of the list. There was a broader authority for the Attorney General. Does your proposal also have that broader authority if you look at the definition?
It does not have broader authority. The one thing you need to know about the terrorist screening database is the one reason it's so large is it has derogatory information about more than 1 million people, but it is information that is not necessarily vetted, corroborated, or investigated. And that's why there's such a difference in the size of the terrorist screening database and the no-fly and selectee list.
And on the 20 Republicans, do you think you have that many?
I did a presentation at lunch. I have very strong and effective co-sponsors in Lindsey Graham, Jeff Flake, and Kelly Ayotte, who are working very hard. And I'm going to continue making the case. But, you know, you never know until you have the vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.